Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mary, and welcome everybody to the online Menopause Center monthly Menopause Cafe. I'm Dr. Ameh, Dr. Joyce, and I'm so pleased to be talking today on stress in the menopause. And I've got a very able co-presenter, Vera, Dr. Martins, who is our naturopath, and she'll be talking about the lifestyle aspect. But I will start first. I'm going to share my screen and then we can start. Okay, I hope everyone can see the screen. This is our monthly Menopause Cafe, and every month we have a different topic. And this month of April is all about stress. I'm sure you've been hearing about it and seeing it in the news and in the blogs. It's a lot about stress, talking about mental health. But did you know that the menopause is quite a stressful period as well? And we're going to be spending a bit of time looking at what are the symptoms of stress, especially for us menopausal women or perimenopausal women, and also looking at how we can avoid or mitigate some of those symptoms. So it's not all doom and gloom. There is light at the end of the tunnel if you just bear with us. And why are we talking about the menopause? Menopause, I'm sure we've been seeing a lot about it. Everyone's talking about it. I'm so pleased to see all the women on the platform this afternoon. But the reason why we're talking about it is because if, as a woman, you live long enough, you will go through it. All of us are going to go through the menopause if we live that long. If you're below the age of 40, that's ahead of you. You will go through it in due course. If you are above 40, but less than 55, believe me, you are actually in the perimenopause right now. Or you might be also menopausal. Most women above the age of 55 should have gone through it. And they can encourage other women, and they also need to learn about why they felt the way in which they felt during the menopause time. Learning about others' experiences and what worked for them might actually ease your own symptoms. So forums such as this, where we talk about it openly, we come together as women talking about our symptoms, are very beneficial for us all. And also the reason why it's so important for us to talk about is because we are living longer. Most women will live a good amount of their time after they go through the menopause. Now, in the 1930s, a woman who looked like me, a Black female woman, her average age at death would be 49. But now we're seeing women, Black African and Caribbean women, living in their mid to late 80s. A white woman in the 1930s would live up to about 61, so she'd lived a little bit longer than the Blacks. And now she's also living to her 80s. So if we think about it, we live a lot of years after the menopause. And that's why it's so important for us to maximize our health during and after the menopause. That's why it's so important to have these discussions. So what is the menopause? So just to be sure that we all are on the same hymn sheet, we all know what we're talking about, we're going to go through some definitions so that we all understand it. Menopause simply means the stopping of menstruation, the pausing of menstruation. The average age in the UK, because it can vary from place to place, is about 51. And most women will experience symptoms of the changing of the fluctuating hormones for up to 10 years before their periods stop. And that era is called the perimenopause. For that period, well before your period stops, and you're experiencing some changes and some fluctuations in your hormones. That's the perimenopause. So that's a long time, 10 years. It's a long time. Luckily, severe menopausal symptoms are not common, but we will all experience one or more of the symptoms of the menopause. And we define the menopause depending on how old you are, but the definition really is the absence of menstruation for 12 consecutive months. So if you've not had a period, let's say you're 48, you've not had a period for 7 months, and then you start to have periods, you have not gone through the menopause. We define it as the absence of menstruation for 12 consecutive months if you're more than 50, and up to 24 months if you're less than 50. And it's also caused by the reduction of the female hormones. And there's 3 hormones that we're going to be talking about in great detail this afternoon. That's our estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So those 2 things, absence of menstruation and reduction in the female hormones, we call that menopause. Because as women, we might not have periods for quite a few medical conditions, including pregnancy. That does not mean you're going through the menopause, okay? So menopause is when you're not having a period and when your hormone levels are reduced. And as mentioned earlier, there is the perimenopause, and that's when you've got the rapid, frequent fluctuations in the frequency of your menstrual cycle, and also the fluctuations in your sex hormones. Those hormones I mentioned earlier, your estrogen, your progesterone, and your testosterone. Now, if you go through the change, we call menopause the change. If you go through the change before the age of 40, we say you have gone through the change prematurely. That's the premature menopause. And there are some quite significant health connotations if that occurs to you. Early menopause are for the women who go through the change between the ages of 45 and 40, between 40 and 45, and that's early menopause. Most of us would go through the change after the age of 45. That's the normal age range. So what are the symptoms? What sort of symptoms do we experience when we are going through the menopause? I know we're going to be talking about stress in the menopause today, but there are so many physical symptoms that we will experience while we're going through the menopause. And I think it's a good idea that we look at these symptoms whilst we're talking about it. Hot flushes, that's the common one. 1 minute we're cold, next minute we're sweating. We feel hot, we feel cold. It can affect our confidence significantly when we're flushing. Night sweats, you're waking up in the night drenched in fluid, in water, in sweat, or you wake up in the morning and you feel very damp. That can also affect your sleep. And even if you're not having night sweats, sleeplessness is a significant part of the menopause. We tend to find that we've got lots of aches and pains in our joints and in our heads. Some people complain about gritty eyes. It's because we start to develop dry eyes. In fact, lots of areas become dry eyes and dry vaginas as well during the perimenopause and the perimenopausal period. Some women experience ringing in the ears. We call that tinnitus. And the interesting thing about the menopause is that we start to lose hair where we have hair and start to gain hair, like on our chin, where we shouldn't be getting hair. Our hair starts changing. We start to get dry skin. That can be very, very itchy. And unfortunately, we start to put on weight, even if we're trying, even if we have exactly the same lifestyle that we've had for decades, the same amount of exercise, the same calorie intake, we will start to gain weight. And we can talk about why that happens later on. In addition, because of the dryness that we get in our vulva, in our vagina, urinary symptoms are common. We find that we're passing urine frequently, and we commonly get lots of water infections. We call that cystitis. So with all these symptoms, you can imagine that the menopause and the perimenopause, they can have quite a significant impact on a woman's mental health. Imagine going into work and you're sweating or you're itching, you've got dry eyes, you didn't sleep well at night, you've got headaches. It can really affect your confidence, it can affect your mood, it can affect your tolerance, and it makes you more stressed. And the unfortunate thing is we can be very much aware of the physical symptoms, so like a hot flush or night sweats, but we're not fully prepared for the changes in our moods and the changes in our emotions. And to be honest, if we're not prepared, our significant others and our colleagues are even less prepared than we are. So from anxiety and low mood to poor concentration and what we call brain fog, these are all aspects of our health that can have significant impact on our quality of life and affect our relationships with our friends, families, and our colleagues at work. But what causes it? Why? Why are we going through all these changes when we are going through the change? The most important thing is there are significant fluctuations in our hormone levels while we're going through the perimenopause, and our hormone levels become almost non-existent when we pass the menopausal period. And if you have a look at this table that I've popped in, the orange line is estrogen and the blue line is progesterone. And you can see that before the age of 45, these levels are quite nice and high. But once they reach the age of 40, 45, they start to fluctuate. They undulate. They go up and down like the waves. And these are the changes in our hormones. And it can actually change from morning to night. You might high levels in the morning and in the evening they are low. And with each of these changes comes changes in our moods. So no wonder we have lots of feelings of being down, tired, weak, depressed when we're going through the menopause. Also, we can see when we get to the age of 50, 55, our hormone levels drop off and they go down. And once we understand what estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, what they actually do in our bodies, then we can understand why we feel the way we feel when we're going through the change. So we'll start with estrogen. That's the one that we've heard about. I'm sure most of us have heard about estrogen. Estrogen is our most dominant female hormone. It has so many benefits in our bodies. It's an anti-anxiety hormone. It also has an antidepressive effect. So no wonder when our hormone levels, our estrogen levels are low, no wonder we feel a bit anxious and a bit, depressed. They also help by increasing the production of our so-called happy hormones, hormones such as serotonin and our endorphins. And these help us to increase the feeling of well-being and the feeling of happiness. Estrogen work primarily on the neurons. These are the nerve cells within the brain, and they support the growth of nerve cells. They bind on the linings of the blood vessels. So imagine our brain is full of blood vessels, full of neurons, and they cause these blood vessels to stay open. We call that vasodilation. So estrogen allows these blood vessels within our brains to stay open, to stay patent, allowing good quality of blood supply to flow through the brain cells. They also play a key role in the production of energy within the brain. The benefits of estrogen include learning, fine motor skills. We know that estrogen has a good role in memory and for us to retain new information. We also know that estrogen helps with our tolerance to pain. And women who have low estrogen levels, they are very sensitive or hypersensitive to painful stimuli. It helps with coordination, and possibly because of the effect on the blood vessels, they help as well with, they protect against things like Alzheimer's, which is dementia, and strokes. Estrogen is an anti-inflammatory hormone, and we know that conditions such as Alzheimer's, they are due to some inflammation within our brain cells. The second hormone is progesterone. And if you remember that slide I showed how the levels go up and down, same thing happens with progesterone. Levels of these hormones can fluctuate quite significantly, and they can become quite low in the menopausal period. And this is important because progesterone has a very calming, very relaxing effect on the body, and low levels of progesterone can cause a mood disorder. Those of us who prescribe progesterone for women, we generally tell them to take it in the evening or at nighttime because of this nice sedative effect. It helps to promote sleep. It also helps with anxiety, stress, and with fear as well. And the last hormone is testosterone. Though it's predominantly a male hormone, it's also a very important hormone in our women's health. It has a significant impact on the woman's central nervous system and the brain. It strengthens the neurons and the blood vessels. And women who have a testosterone deficiency, they often complain of difficulty in making decisions or difficulty in concentration and brain fog, which means they can't really think clearly. So all three hormones are very important for our brain health and for our general health. There isn't a specific one hormone deficiency. They all work in combination with the others. The symptoms of stress, especially in menopausal women, are listed here on the slide, and there's probably more. We've got mood swings with all those fluctuations, foggy thinking, we can't think straight, a lot of issues with sleep. We either struggle to fall asleep or we wake up sweating or wake up during the sleep, wake up in the morning. We don't feel like having intercourse. We lose our libido. That's also a sign of low testosterone in women. We're very irritable. We have low mood. We can snap for no reason. Sometimes we just cry. We've got no reason for it. We get very angry. They say we see red. And we lose our confidence. And we feel really low in our moods. And if before you go through this period, you have a pre-existing mental health condition, if you had, when you were younger, suffered from anxiety or depression yourself, you do tend to find that these symptoms get worse when you're going through the menopause because your ability to cope reduces. And it's a challenge for doctors such as myself. I am a GP, as well as a menopause specialist doctor. It's a challenge for us to really unpick the mental illness from menopause. Because if you look at those symptoms, as I mentioned earlier, these symptoms, they could be symptoms of depression or anxiety in themselves. And it's a challenge really to determine whether a woman is actually going through the menopause or whether she has a primary mental health issue. Because there are loads of risk factors that occur when a woman is going through the change. At that time, a woman has a lot more responsibilities. She might be looking after children. She might be looking after her grandchildren. Her parents may be older. She may be looking after those. Most women will have more responsibilities within their work, and there are more work challenges, adding stress to an already stressful situation. They may already have health problems before they go through the change. If you've got long-term conditions such as hypertension or diabetes or obesity, you find that it's a challenge to navigate the menopausal period. And so mood conditions in the menopause can be multifactorial. It could be due to pre-existing conditions. It could be due to the change itself. It could be due to what's going on in the family. And it's difficult to assess. And often women are put on antidepressants. I must say, I have been guilty of doing that. And it may not be effective. It might be, but it may not be. If the truth of the matter is, it is purely the menopause. So we're going to be talking about what can be done. And we spent a lot of time about what it is, but it's so important to know that so much can be done for us women. Once we recognize and realize these are menopausal symptoms, then we can now start to look at what can we do for them. And I look at hormone replacement therapy as, I'm not here to sell it, but I'm here to talk about hormone replacement therapy because, to be fair, it is the most effective treatment for menopausal symptoms. If you are lacking, let's say, vitamin D, the treatment would be to replace your vitamin D deficiency with vitamin D. If you're lacking iron, your doctor would give you iron. So if you are having symptoms due to an estrogen or progesterone or a testosterone deficiency, then the treatment should be replacement of those deficiencies. That's the way I look at it. I am aware that not everybody can take it, but it is a good starting point. It is the most effective and widely used treatment for menopausal symptoms. HRT helps to relieve those symptoms related to estrogen deficiency and other deficiencies. It definitely improves symptoms such as anxiety, depression, and your vasomotor symptoms such as your sweats, hot flushes, and night sweats. And there are various forms. We're not here to talk about those forms in particular, but it should all be tailored to what the woman needs and what the woman wants. We've got tablets, creams, gels, patches, sprays. There are so many different forms out there. I would always advise when we're thinking about medications such as HRT to get specialist advice. Because if you remember the previous slides, when we're looking at the multifactorial reasons for stress in the menopause, it's not just, everybody can't just take HRT. Everybody needs to have a holistic approach to their managing their symptoms. And my symptoms might be different from my neighbors and vice versa. So it's always a good idea to get specialist advice. And that's why we are here. When is the best time to start HRT? When is the best time to consider it? It's in those 10 years before you go through the change. That perimenopausal phase, when you're getting all those symptoms, that's the best time to have a discussion with your doctor, with your clinician, with your specialist, to talk and consider hormone replacement therapy. It's not when you're in your 70s or in your 80s. The best time to start is always in the perimenopause. And that's HRT. But there are so many other treatments and options out there. Like I mentioned, not everybody can take HRT. Not everybody can tolerate HRT, but everybody can make adjustments to their lifestyle. So I'm going to pass on to my able colleague, Vera, who's going to talk about the various lifestyle amendments and adjustments that we can do, all of us can do, when we're going through the change. Over to you, Vera. Vera, are you on mute?
Hi, sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me now? So I was just saying, it's a pleasure to be here today with this community, and particularly presenting together with Dr. Joyce, who has delivered beautifully such important information. So hopefully I'll be able to complement what she has already introduced from a lifestyle and the naturopathy point of view. So as I was introduced at the beginning, I am the resident naturopath at the OMC, and I often work alongside the medical doctors at the clinic, supporting patients that are already on HRT. So this is important for you to understand that it can be safely done alongside HRT, and is actually a really good complement. And some women may not be able to take HRT, or they just prefer a natural route, and that those are also options. So naturopathy offers a really sort of, I would say, a 360-degree approach. And I find that this is actually particularly useful in menopause, because it's a life stage where different body systems are impacted, as Dr. Joyce really highlighted really well. And stress support is definitely one of the most important pillars in balancing hormones in my approach. And why is that? So in addition to what Dr. Joyce already said, I think it's quite clear why stress support is important. But I would like to sort of touch a little bit on cortisol, which is an important hormone that also plays a role in how your sex hormones actually will be impacting on the body. So we know that the menopause puts more stress on the body. And at the same time, our resilience to stress is reduced at this life stage. We have learned from Dr. Joyce how the decrease in our sex hormones makes it more difficult to cope. So it kind of creates this vicious cycle where stress becomes really impactful. So as I just said, cortisol here sort of starts playing a role. So stress also affects production of the stress hormone cortisol, which then in this scenario is more likely to be raised, which then will further impact on, the symptoms of perimenopause. We know that cortisol is a hormone that can impact on sleep, can produce weight gain, particularly around the waist area, and can actually be contributor to a lot of these cluster symptoms that we see here at the end, anxiety, mood changes, as I said, sleep, brain fog. So it's really important to understand how, we can manage stress from a lifestyle point of view. And it's very interesting that this lower resilience to stress and the anxiety, this kind of more sort of psychological symptoms, they can start in the very early stages of perimenopause. And women may not necessarily link these symptoms with their changing hormones. In fact, there is recent research from the think tank GenM that shows that 70% of women experience these perimenopausal psychological and emotional symptoms as early as in their 30s and 40s, and 90% of them fail to link the symptoms to their fluctuating hormones. So this is really important because women need to be informed to recognize the symptoms so they can search for the right help and get the right support. So naturopathy can be an extremely important and safe tool to support the stress response in menopause alongside HRT, as I just said. So yeah, so you just moved the slide, right? That's fine. Let me just say if there was anything. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, so I've covered most of it here. So let's have a look at what can be done from a naturopathy point of view. And I'll start with diet, because diet has to be one of the most important aspects, and if not the foundation. So here the key is to prioritize foods that can nourish the brain and the nervous system, but also combine foods in the right way. So it's not just about what you are eating, but how you're combining the foods, and that's really important. And we will understand that, understand why in a short while. So, for instance, we know that good fats are really important for brain health, particularly oily fish. They help regulating the neurotransmitters, dopamine and serotonin, which can have calming and relaxing properties. So good fats should be sort of top of the list when it comes to support, your brain health and mental health. Another important tip, this is actually how, when I mention combination of foods, is that it's really important to have a source of protein with every meal, including breakfast, and prioritize complex carbs over simple carbs. And this is because those changes help you to balance your blood sugar levels. And the blood sugar balance is actually, I have this way of working where I call like sort of my pillars of hormone balance. And actually we won't have time today to go into that detail, but basically blood sugar balance is another important pillar, because it's really important, in so all these symptoms, these cluster symptoms we discussed, and it can actually be quite impacted during menopause. And we also know that high blood sugar levels trigger cortisol in the body. So it's another way that cortisol starts to play a role if we're not careful with what we eat. And we know that balanced blood sugar levels support mood, good sleep, and make you have your energy levels more balanced throughout the day. So these are all factors that can also help to reduce stress if you've got those under control. And this is actually really important in menopause because women in menopause are more likely to have high blood sugar levels. This is really well known. And so it's something to be even more aware at this life stage. Another important type of food to keep in mind is fermented foods. So this is because these are foods that are rich in probiotics. So they help to keep a healthy community of good bacteria in the gut. And also foods that are called prebiotics. So the prebiotics are the ones that feed the probiotics, so the ones that feed the bacteria in the gut. And prebiotics is any food that is really, rich in fiber, but also things that are rich in antioxidants like berries and cacao. So incorporate them into your diet daily. And this aspect of supporting the community of bacteria in your gut is because we also know, in addition to all the important health benefits that the gut has, we know there is a strong link between the gut and the brain. So that's something also to keep in mind. If we want to sort of look at it from a more general point of view, I would just say, just focus on prioritizing foods as part of a Mediterranean diet. I think that covers really well the recommendations that I have here, and you cannot go wrong. And just as a final note on diet, I'm really a great advocate of avoiding strict and restrictive diets, particularly at this life stage. I know there is a lot of emphasis on what you shouldn't be eating, and because it's a life stage where we're also more likely to put on weight, then there may be a tendency to actually restrict ourselves. But we know from data, but also I personally, in my clinical experience, can tell you that can definitely exacerbate symptoms. So it's very important to keep that in mind. It's about having an inclusive diet based on all foods and eating nourishing foods. So it's really time to nourish your body and not to punish your body. So next slide. Yes, thank you. So when it comes to botanicals, so the botanicals are excellent tools to support the stress response. And as part of my naturopathy training, I'm also a herbalist. So definitely botanicals have a really special place in my heart. And I guess that, I don't think there's even one patient I see that doesn't go with at least one botanical in the treatment plan. And I just want to emphasize that, botanicals have such a long tradition of usage, and that is something to really honor. But also because of my background as a researcher, I really prioritize herbs that have been used in clinical trials. So I have a very evidence-based approach. So when it comes to botanicals in this sort of field of stress and anxiety support, my go-to herb has to be ashwagandha. If some of you have heard me talking before, they probably noticed that I always mention this herb if we're talking about stress and anxiety and all these brain sort of symptoms that we can get around menopause. And that's because it's a herb that is really, it's almost like ticks all the boxes in that department. So ashwagandha is what we call an adaptogen. So it's a herb that, it's in the name, sort of, it helps us to adapt. It sort of balances how the hypothalamus, so that's part of the brain, communicates with the adrenal glands to support the stress response. And in this way, it helps, it's almost like, in a way, a buffer that helps you to cope better with stress. And as a consequence, you are much less likely to have high levels of cortisol. So I think after we discussed a bit of cortisol, I think now you can understand why this herb can be really helpful. And it's also like great that has been used in several clinical trials. As I mentioned, these herbs that I work with, they have been researched. So this one, we have evidence that it works. And I work with this herb in clinic very, very often, and the results are really good. So data shows that, it reduces anxiety, as I just said, but there are specific data showing how it can improve memory, cognitive function. It's not in the slide, but it's also known to improve libido, and it can actually reduce also sugar cravings, or cravings in general that are stress related. So I think you can get the idea why it's an herb that can be very helpful at this life stage. It's just really sort of like comprehensive what it can do. And then the second one that I like is lemon balm. And, you know, it's also a good herb to support the stress response and reduce anxiety. But this one is particularly good if there are issues like in terms of mood swings. So it's kind of has that angle of supporting mood a bit more. And then I would like also to touch on cacao. So cacao is an interesting one because we may not even sort of connect it as being a herb, but it is part of a botanical family. There is sort of like a very, the definition between food and herbs is it's not necessarily black and white. So like cacao is something that you may have already in your house, like when I talk about cacao, is not the chocolate that we know as in, you know, mixed with the sugar or milk. Is talking about the pure raw cacao powder. Is actually a little bit bitter, but there are ways to make it, you know, maybe you can mix it with a little bit of honey. But the point here is that cacao is actually really well researched and a botanical that is known to improve cognitive function, but it's also known to reduce anxiety and improve mood. So it's got also like these health benefits, you know, in this context. And there is a nice piece of research, very recent, that actually shows that it works to improve mood and reduces anxiety. And this happens in association with increased microbiota diversity, so in the gut. So that's really interesting because it's sort of reinforcing this idea about the gut-brain axis. And so cacao is something you can easily incorporate into your morning routine, and is a nice way to give you also like a sort of an energy boost, which because it has some caffeine as well, but like much lower compared to like coffee. So the next slide. So in regards to supplements, in terms of vitamins and minerals that I would consider, obviously this is quite general, and part of actually the naturopathy approach is that consultations and treatment plans are very personalized depending on your health history and on your particular symptoms and anything else that's going on in your life. So that's one of the things. It's a really sort of tailored approach. But these are things that's why I'm talking about them here. I think they can be really important and apply to most women. And one of them is vitamin D. So vitamin D is on top of the list because it's really one of the priority sort of supplements. And in our clinic, we actually test quite often to understand if vitamin D levels are within the normal range. And that's because it can affect, you know, several aspects of health that are even more important during menopause, like bone health and mental health. So in terms of mental health, we have research that shows that it can specifically improve anxiety and cognitive function. And as I say, vitamin D is actually very important also for other aspects like bone health and immunity. So definitely key in menopause. So most vitamin D is made by our bodies as a result of exposure to sunlight. But because particularly during months from October, between October and March, and also people that are at higher risk, like so people that have little exposure to sun, possibly people in the UK, so or people with dark skin, these people are at higher risks. So I think then it's definitely important to consider whether you should supplement, and if in doubt, just get your levels tested. And then regarding the other supplements, so a combination of magnesium and B vitamins, it's a really important one to support the adrenal glands. So the adrenal glands are the glands that produce cortisol, the stress hormone we talked about, and they are, high levels of stress impact on the adrenal glands. So it's quite important to sort of give them the right, nutrition to help them to cope and to function well, because the adrenal glands also help producing our sex hormones that Dr. Joyce just talked about a while ago. So the testosterone, progesterone. And so these, if our adrenal glands are sort of more impacted in menopause, when the adrenal glands are also supporting the sex hormones production, then if they are more impacted, then they will further impact, you know, on the production of sex hormones. And so it's more likely that the menopausal symptoms will be even, you know, more exacerbated. So that's why looking after, you know, the health of your adrenal glands is really important. And so some supplements are really key, such as magnesium, vitamin B, vitamin C is also really important. So you can get it through diet, but you may want to supplement extra. And the magnesium in particular, I also have a really soft spot for magnesium. It's really, really important, actually, that one. And particularly if there are sleep issues, magnesium is excellent to support sleep. There's quite a lot of research as well, so showing how it supports sleep, reduces anxiety. I mean, it's called nature's calming mineral for a reason. So I would definitely suggest to consider that one very, very seriously. Next one. So the next slide is about the self-care tool. So what can we do actually in terms of looking after our bodies from a more self-care point of view? Obviously, diet and the botanicals are part of self-care, but there are definitely tools that can be done and implemented on a daily basis and for free that can be really important. And if I may even say they are the foundation for stress management. And I find that if people, you know, like it's almost like combination. So naturopathy, we do look at the diet, we consider supplements and botanicals, but the self-care tools are a really important part of it. I talk to them not at the beginning because I think it's sort of in a way more exciting maybe to learn about the foods and the botanicals, but it's almost like this should be, you know, the foundation if we're looking at the pyramid. This means that if you may be taking the most expensive supplements and be very good with your diet, but if there is not sort of if you're not making time for ourselves to breathe, to create a little bit of me time to allow ourselves to engage with the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our brains that allows us to relax, then everything else you may be doing may not reach the same results. So I just want to emphasize how important it is to find a little bit of time for yourself. So all of these, I have some examples here of self-care tools that you may consider. And all of these have actually been shown to reduce stress and reduce cortisol levels. There is not like, you know, the best sort of technique. I don't think there's such thing. Everyone is different. So what I always advise is to people to try for yourself and see what works best for you. Because I think menopause is also a time for you to be able to reassess priorities and allow some transformation to take place. So just be curious, be humble, and accepting at the same time. So that's a nice sort of timing to experiment. So from what we have here, there's just a couple of things I would like to highlight because I find that they're really important. So one of them is the sort of the light exposure. It's something that not everyone may be aware, but it's a really important aspect of self-care, which means exposing yourself to daylight in the morning, ideally outdoors if you can. So a walk in the park, it's a good idea if you have that opportunity, and then avoid exposure to bright lights, particularly blue light, which is the light that is emitted by screen devices such as computers, mobile phones, iPads. So avoid that kind of light in the evening, at least an hour before bedtime. And this sounds like really simple and really basic, but it's actually really important. A lot of research is backing up this as an important measure to reset our circadian rhythm. What this does is that it helps your body to know when is morning and when is night. And this leads to the production of the right hormones at the right time. So melatonin, which is the hormone that helps you to sleep, is supposed to be high at night. But if we are exposing ourselves to like bright lights and blue lights, the body mistakes that from being daylight, actually, the day. So then you don't have enough melatonin sometimes to make you sleep. So that's why it's really important to just with the simple changes like these, you can help a lot your body to cope with these symptoms, particularly sleep. Obviously, this will help with sleep significantly, but also, with mood, stress. It's a really important one. And then just the other one I would like to mention is called emotional freedom technique. And some people also have heard of it maybe as tapping. And I just want to mention this because it may not be a very well-known technique, maybe not, obviously not as known as meditation or breath work, but it's a really helpful one. Again, so lots of research and particular data showing how it reduces cortisol, how it improves sleep, anxiety, mood, cravings, depression. So it's a really nice tool. And if you are interested, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about it and even share some resources. And we can go to the next slide. Please. And so just as to sort of final slide, still obviously on our lifestyle and self-care tools, just want to also touch on exercise. So here we talk about exercise for the body, but also for the brain. So it's really essential. So the idea is for you to sort of keep yourself engaged with activities and exercises that promote mental well-being, mental agility, keep challenging yourself. And that is a way to avoid the loss of gray matter in the brain that can be exacerbated by the loss of estrogen, as Dr. Joyce mentioned earlier. So we do obviously things that can help to counteract that tendency that the decline in hormones can bring. So here are the few examples of brain exercises, but anything obviously that keeps you engaged, keeps you stimulated. Maybe you can start a new hobby as well, painting, dancing, just things also that bring joy. I think it's really important to allow yourself this life stage to explore. And also physical exercise, it's important, and particularly for bone health, which is another aspect of health that can be impacted at this life stage. And actually, in terms of exercise, I would also like to make a note. It's something that people may not be as aware of. We all know about the importance of exercise, but it's actually important to also be aware of not over exercising, particularly at this life stage. So this is because when we over exercise, so meaning that, I have some patients that come to me and just say, okay, I'm doing everything I can to lose weight. I exercise every day, I run, I go to the gym, and then they actually, one of the main symptoms is they are exhausted. So it kind of becomes a vicious cycle. And they say they don't feel good after exercising, they feel really tired. And so I think if this sort of resonates and you kind of thinking, oh, actually this is the case, maybe you just want to stop and think, because maybe what your body needs then, it's a little bit of a rest, reset, and just sort of have more of a gentle approach. Doesn't mean that you have to stop exercising, but it's about reframing it, and you may just need to give your body a chance to rebalance, probably the cortisol aspect here is also playing a role. So this is because if you over-exercise, that is a type of stressor to the body, meaning that your levels of cortisol are likely to be also altered. Particularly if you are exercising hard late in the day, so closer to bedtime, that can also affect your sleep. So rethink maybe whether you can make some changes, and you could prioritize exercise more early in the day, and maybe just reduce the amount of days you do exercise, replace some sessions that you do of more cardio with a strength exercise, which is actually more recommended around menopause, also for bone strengthening, and also implement and swap, as I said, some of your more regular type of exercise, maybe running, with something that is a little bit more mind-body nourishing, maybe like yoga. So anything that obviously keeps you moving, but also makes you feel happy and balanced, and that you're not stretching your body too much. So it's sort of like finding that balance there. I wanted to sort of touch on that. And yeah, so I think that's me with lifestyle, and I'll pass it now over to Dr. Joyce to wrap up.
Oh, thank you so much. That was so informative. Honestly, I've actually taken notes myself
Thank
to
you.
pick up some things. I need to talk to you later. I have no idea what that tapping thing is, so we'll have a chat later on.
I
But
know.
I wanted to end this talk on a positive, and that is to talk about the benefits, because we've been talking about so many negative things to do with the menopause. Menopause is a phase in a woman's life. It does not mean it is we are at death's door. There are so many benefits, things that we should look forward to. So we're not going to have periods. When you go through the change, that monthly bleed is going to end. And that has got to be a positive, yes? If you were struggling with PMS, so before your bleed, you get angry, you feel like murdering someone, all that's going to go. You don't need to worry about getting pregnant if you have sex. So that's also a benefit, okay? If you struggled with uterine fibroids during your reproductive years, we do know after the menopause, these fibroids shrink and you start to feel self-assured. You don't need to worry about carrying your tampons or your pads or whether you're leaking. You know, all those are gone. And you can now focus on taking care of yourself. And I think for a woman going through the menopause, it's a time to, as Vera said, try something new, try some risks, look at it as a phase. You know, the world is your oyster. I think there's a lot of benefits to the menopause. So I want to end with that, and I hope you enjoyed this this afternoon's cafe. I'm gonna try and stop my share. I'm not technical, so good luck. And I'm passing you back to Mary, our practice manager.